If I have succeeded in actually making people look at the presidency as not something that's distant, not attached to people, but at least as one that's more engaged, close to the people, I think that would be something that I would be very happy about.
Halimah Yacob is used to breaking new ground. The former lawyer was the first female Malay member of parliament since independence, the first woman Speaker of Parliament in 2013, and in 2017, Singapore's first female president.
Every one of us who takes up a public office, and especially an office as high as this, is basically to serve. So you ask yourself, in what way can you serve? In life, we go through several stages, and at every stage, every opportunity that comes to serve, it requires different things from you. So as a president, I know that, this is the highest office of the land. There are very strong expectations. And as you know, it is something all-consuming. It is subject to public scrutiny. People don't easily go into that kind of a situation unless they really want to serve. And that was the primary consideration. In what way can I contribute? In what way can I serve? And that was solely the thing that drives me to take up the elected presidency.
Presidential election 2017. Result of nominations. Madam Halimah Yacob is the only candidate who has been nominated. I declare Madam Halimah Yacob as the candidate elected to the office of President of the Republic of Singapore.
The presidential election of 2017 was a walkover. It was also Singapore's first reserved election for candidates from the Malay community. Since the first president of Singapore, Yusof Ishak, served from 1965 to 1970, no Malay had been president. An amendment to the Constitution means a presidential election will now be reserved for a community if no one from that community has held the office of president for any of the 5 most recent terms. There were also changes to the eligibility criteria. A senior executive would have to manage a company with at least $500 million in shareholder equity for the most recent 3-year period of services. The rationale was that the president would have to make large-scale and complex decisions when analyzing the drawdowns of the national reserves. And in the final analysis, the Presidential Elections Committee decides if the candidates meet the requirements. Halimah Yacob was the only candidate to be granted the Certificate of Eligibility for the 2017 presidential election.
I believe that this is a proud moment for Singapore. This is a proud moment for multiculturalism, multiracialism in our society. I am a president for everyone. Regardless of race, language, religion, or creed, I represent everyone. My duty remains only to Singapore and Singaporeans.
At her swearing in, the 8th president set out her priorities to serve the nation.
Elected President of the Republic of Singapore. The presidency is the highest office in our land and is a key institution in our democracy. It unifies our nation by embodying our shared values as a people: multiracialism, meritocracy, and stewardship. These values are even more important today, guiding us as we find our way forward in a troubled and uncertain world.
President Halimah would set about to raise awareness for issues close to her heart: the welfare of workers, providing opportunities for the disadvantaged, and unifying Singaporeans.
She's very particular about closing the income gaps, about gender equality, and of course, about inclusion, especially disability hiring for the persons with disabilities.
I know one thing, President Halimah has a compassion and empathy for persons with mental illness, and she really feels that they are marginalised and need to be spoken up and advocated for. And so my experience with her really is that loving heart that she has for this group.
I think she'll really be known for championing for vulnerable communities. I think that's really where her heart is. Social equality, social integration, and helping people with disabilities. And we see that also in many of the events that she attended.
But the biggest satisfaction is that I'm able to look at how I could promote the welfare of people, people's welfare. Also the sense that I am drawing resources from all over, you know, in order to address some of the issues that I am passionate about.
Her special role as a president of several firsts has helped her serve across the board.
Well, I'm the first female president, you know, and first female minority president wearing a tudung. For women, I think it's very important. Very few women that reach a very high leadership position. I think that's really quite a plus point for Singapore, because a lot of people look at Singapore and when they meet me, then it is what we've always been talking about. Social mobility, we've been talking about meritocracy, you know. And for me, it's a very unique experience because I came from a very poor background, very deprived. And then, as I said, because of my gender as a female and also because of my minority status, it does provide me with a very unique opportunity to serve all classes of people, regardless of race, gender, regardless of religion, regardless of social status. And certainly my trade union background helps tremendously in this respect. And when I meet foreign leaders, I think, you know, in a sense also then it is good for Singapore because it shows that Singapore does practice what it preaches, you see, in terms of providing avenues for social mobility, in terms of providing avenues for meritocracy to all individuals.
But in May 2023, towards the close of her 6-year term, the president made a decision.
After very careful consideration, I have decided not to stand for re-election.
President Halimah explained why she would not run for re-election for a second term.
Well, my primary consideration is that I want to retire. I'm retiring. Somehow, people find that very difficult to absorb, to accept. I am retiring because, you know, one of the things you must know about being a holder of a public office, it is entirely all-consuming. You do not have any privacy at all. You're always out in the public arena. You're always subject to intense scrutiny, and you do lose out many years with the family. And so one of the things that we always say, you know, well, we are going to try to catch up with the family. But then you realize that the family have all grown up, the children have all grown up. They've got their own lives. And it's not so easy to say, I want to retire and I want to catch up. I'm sure many people who retired discovered that. But at least I have grandchildren. So that's one way where I can then refresh, reignite, strengthen the bonding with the family. So that's what I intend to do. And also to pursue perhaps other interests which I have not been able to do because of a very busy career right up to now.
Halimah Yacob put her stamp on the presidency in her 6 years in office. But in 2020, midway through her presidency, she would find herself grappling with one of the biggest challenges in her career.
I think I will be remembered, whether I like it or not, as a president that presided during the COVID-19 period. And that, I think, is one of the defining points of my presidency. It is a pandemic that we've never seen before, and of such a scale and gravity. And it's a double whammy in terms of both health and economic from perspectives.
In January 2020, a new respiratory virus began making the headlines. Stringent measures were put in place to keep the COVID-19 virus at bay. Against the backdrop of the outbreak, Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Heng Swee Keat presented the budget in Parliament on 18 February 2020.
Our immediate concern is to protect you and your families. We will put in every effort to slow down the spread of the virus.
There were also measures for workers and businesses to tide them over anticipated disruptions.
With these uncertainties, I know Singaporeans are understandably very concerned about the impacts on our businesses and jobs. I will introduce two special packages with a total budget of $5.6 billion.
Just 5 weeks later, Mr. Heng would be back in Parliament with support measures worth $48 billion, this time with a warning that Singapore would need to dip into past reserves.
This is a landmark package and a necessary response to a unique situation. The government has sought and obtained the President's in-principle support to draw up to $17 billion from our past reserves to fund parts of the resilience budget.
At that point, this would be the biggest draw on past reserves, which had only been used one other time in 2009, when President S.R. Nathan approved a draw of $4.9 billion as the global financial crisis hit. Behind the scenes, there had been a flurry of activity. Both the Prime Minister and Cabinet and the President have to agree before the past reserves can be used. The President reviewed the proposal with her Council of Presidential Advisers. The President is obliged to consult this council when considering discretionary powers related to fiscal matters. Then the President and the Council were briefed by various agencies.
With regards to the past reserves, I'm very clear in my mind. I'm only authorized to release past reserves for exceptional, very exceptional circumstances. So we established the reason that is it truly exceptional? If the answer is yes, then we go to the next question, and that is how much of the past reserves should we allow the government to draw down? Now that is a very intense process. The first part is very intense because we have the government, Minister for Finance, Minister for MTI, Minister for Health, and all their officers coming to brief us, for us then to ask the questions, the relevant questions. You know, if you say the health situation is critical, what do you mean by that? Hospitals, if you say it's going to be overwhelmed if you don't have additional facilities, what do you mean by that? So once we've established that, then we go to the second part, and that is the question of how much to draw down. That is for the government then to justify, to say we need this amount, these billions of dollars for these purposes and this program, and the programs are then all itemized. We have our role to protect the reserves and to make sure that the government's request is reasonable.
Tan Ching Yi from the Finance Ministry was on the receiving end of questions by the President and the Council of Presidential Advisers.
Obviously, the first question of the day was, is this a valid use of past reserves? So, yes or no. Next would be, why this amount? And if we were to use this amount, what is it in aid of? And all the measures that you say you're going to put in place, are they going to be effective to meet the objectives you said you were going to fulfill, whether it was to reduce unemployment or to ensure that new entrants to the labour market would not be scarred for life by entering a labour market that was not hiring, and they would move from school into unemployment immediately. The question that nobody could give a definitive answer to was really how long the crisis was going to last and in what form it would take next. And I think the President and the CPA understood this well.
So the first time is always most difficult in an issue that's so uncertain, so complex, and so hard to predict. For me, every meeting, I'm impressed by the sort of questions that she comes up with. She can ask a whole range of questions, from technical questions to geopolitical questions, and they're all relevant. And it shows a mastery of the subjects that we are briefed on. And she's very forthright. I mean, you know what she's after, you know what she wants. And I think after a while, our ministries, both civil servants and politicians, know that they have to come prepared when they want to brief the President and the CPA.
COVID-19 infections continued to climb past 1,000. On April 3rd, Singapore stepped up its fight to try and break viral transmission.
We will therefore impose significantly stricter measures. This is like a circuit breaker. It will help to reduce the risk of a big outbreak occurring.
To further support our people and businesses this is a generation.
A day after the measures kicked in, the Finance Minister unveiled the Solidarity Budget on 6 April 2020, with $5.1 billion to tide the Singapore economy through the circuit breaker, again seeking the President's in-principle support to draw an additional $4 billion from past reserves. By mid-April, more than 5,000 cases of the virus had been reported in Singapore, and 11 people had died. Singapore's fourth budget in 4 months would be unveiled in May 2020. In June, President Halimah gave the go-ahead to fund the COVID-19 packages, which could draw an additional $31 billion from Singapore's reserves.
I must say the discussions are so robust, so many meetings. You remember there were 5 drawdowns from the past reserves. There were 11 budgets throughout my whole, 6 years of service. So you can imagine there's only 6 years, right? But there'll be 11 budgets. And those meetings actually don't last just half an hour. They lasted a few hours because we need to ask questions, we need to be satisfied. We wanted more information, we get those information. And even during COVID, you have to bear in mind that these were all done during the COVID period. We had to also take into account the social distancing measures. Half of the CPA and the ministry's officials had to be separated, put in a separate room because we can't be all together. And then we do via Zoom so that everyone is still on the same page, but whilst observing the social distancing measures.
The COVID situation is a very complex one. As it is an evolving situation, we had many briefings from various government ministries. When the CPA deliberated on the proposals that were submitted, we looked at it very critically and we looked at the absolute necessity. Well, I have to say that the President, really has this ability to get to the crux of the issues. And she really asked the most incisive, most challenging questions. And she comes very well prepared. Okay. I like that, if it's needed, she's able to drill down into details, underlying assumptions, projections, etc. So I think her focus is to make sure that whatever we do is very targeted, gets to the objective that you want to achieve, and then it is also prudent at the same time.
The numbers were much smaller, and in fact, some of the money that was put aside was never used. In this case, we used a great deal of it, and I think her legacy will be that she was the President that was there, and together with government, we worked cooperatively and to solve and manage a crisis of such magnitude.
In August that year, the President opened Parliament.
We are starting a new term of government under the shadow of COVID-19. Singapore has been fully engaged in this fight, but the situation continues to unfold. We are injecting almost $100 billion into the economy. These measures have reduced the immediate pain, but things will remain grave for quite some time.
$52 billion would come from past reserves in 2020. Over the 3 years, President Halimah approved a total of 5 drawdowns from past reserves. This includes $11 billion in 2021 and $6 billion in 2022. The battle against the pandemic saw much hardship and sacrifices by healthcare professionals in particular.
It's been a truly difficult 2 years, but I think it's important that we do it together and we support all our frontline workers. Please excuse me. It's also a learning moment for all of us that we were fortunate, we had very good governance and we had a very good reserves base where we could use it in order to take care of the needs of Singaporeans.
The face of Singapore to the world, President Halimah would chalk up a number of diplomatic firsts for Singapore.
At all times, I have really done my best to project what Singapore stands for, equality, social mobility, multiracialism. That's what I've always strived to do. And I hope that that's a message that they get when it comes to many of the world leaders that I've met.
Halimah Yacob's first overseas visit as president came in October of 2017.
The first visit to a foreign country I went was to attend the funeral of the late King Bhumibol. That was in 2017.
President Halimah would also attend the funeral of the late Queen Elizabeth in 2022. And then the coronation of the King, Charles III. On the sidelines of the visit, President Halimah spoke about Singapore-UK relations, how their deep historical bond spans 2 centuries. She said both countries look to develop solutions to address shared challenges such as climate change and continue to expand economic opportunities. From the start of her time in office, President Halimah would visit a series of ASEAN countries and welcome leaders in turn to the Istana. Member of Parliament Joan Pereira was part of the delegation when the President made her first state visit in May of 2018 to Brunei.
Madam President received a ceremonial welcome, and that's a great honor. And in fact, she was also hosted to a state banquet, and that's equally another great honor. We visited the officer cadets from the SAF who trained in the Tempurung jungle.
A state visit to the Philippines in September 2019 celebrated half a century of diplomatic ties. 3 years later, President Halimah hosted newly elected Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. in Singapore.
46 years ago, Singapore welcomed another distinguished visitor from the Philippines, the late President Ferdinand Marcos Sr., together with his wife. It is our great pleasure to be able to host another President Marcos here this afternoon.
President of the Republic of Indonesia. Halimah, good morning. Nice to see you.
In October 2019, President Halimah met Indonesian President Joko Widodo at the Singapore University of Social Sciences. President Halimah was attending in her capacity as patron of the university. President Widodo was there to see his youngest son graduate. They took the opportunity to reaffirm long-standing ties between the two countries. President Halimah's state visit to Indonesia in February 2020 was the first by a Singapore head of state in 8 years. President Halimah hosted Malaysia's king, Sultan Abdullah Sultan Ahmad Shah, in 2022 as the pandemic eased and borders reopened. But other issues came to the forefront, like the war in Ukraine.
In the face of a complicated geopolitical landscape, it behooves us to continue to strengthen trust and understanding between our two countries and to work together for mutual benefit for our people.
Most Malaysian prime ministers during her tenure also paid President Halimah a courtesy call at the Istana. In November 2019, Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad called on her. A day later, President Halimah conferred an honorary Doctor of Law to Dr. Mahathir at the National University of Singapore. The President is the Chancellor of NUS. In January 2023, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim called on the President. Following that meeting, Prime Minister Anwar and Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong witnessed the signing of 3 government-to-government agreements. These would strengthen bilateral cooperation and help both countries take advantage of opportunities in the digital economy and green economy. President Halimah's first state visit to Malaysia followed soon after, in March of 2023.
I went on a state visit to Malaysia, and for the first time, we had a tree planting ceremony. We had even an orchid named after me. They've never done it before. So those are things that are quite, they're very touching, because they make the extra effort to try and look at the head of state coming and try to make it comfortable for the head of state.
President Halimah also visited China twice.
President Xi Jinping invited me on 2 occasions. One was on the Asian Civilizations Dialogue. He invited me to be speaker, and with regards to that, I also had organized 2 conferences. I initiated 2 conferences, International Conference on Cohesive Societies in 2019 and another one in 2022, for the basic reason of ensuring that we continue to talk about social cohesion, not just at the domestic level, but internationally. So that's very aligned to what we were doing also. The second one was, of course, the Beijing Olympics. At both meetings, President Xi, we had very good discussions, very warm, very friendly discussions. The relationship between Singapore and China is a very good relationship, and he reinforces that at the meetings that I had with him, and for that, I think it is good that we continue with that.
She had actually been invited for a state visit to China, and we had wanted to carry this out in 2020, which would have been the 30th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between the 2 countries. Unfortunately, COVID happened, and so we had to postpone the visits, and the Chinese kept reiterating the invitation for her to come for the state visit. In the end, we decided that we should respond positively to the invitation by President Xi for her to attend the opening of the Winter Olympics. She was a small number of very carefully selected state leaders to be invited for the opening ceremony. Not only were the atmospherics warm and the conversation substantial and fruitful, I think President Halimah represented Singapore very well, both by her being present there, having a very good substantive meeting with President Xi Jinping, and showing the breadth and depth of the bilateral relations between the 2 countries.
Halimah Yacob welcomed 50 heads of state and government to Singapore in her 6 years in office.
Well, I think in such a world where everything is so unsettled, the important message is to really transmit that we are a consistent partner with the countries that I meet, reliable, so that it's important to generate trust and goodwill. Because relationship with other countries is not built on one day, 1 year, but it's consistently for many years.
President Halimah is very calm and very easygoing. Reference to my experience working with her, I've seen changes in the program. But as much as I can see, she's very calm and very supportive with the changes. I know that people doesn't like changes, but as much as I can see, she's very accommodating and try to make things easy for the staff and for us.
Morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
During COVID-19, state visits to the Istana were reduced as other countries tightened travel restrictions.
Honorable Kamala Harris, Vice President of the U.S.
Good morning. Good morning.
But America's first female Vice President, Kamala Harris, paid a courtesy call on Singapore's first female president in August of 2021. The president wrote about the visit in a Facebook post. She said they reiterated the strategic importance of the US to the Asia-Pacific region and how its presence has contributed to the peace, stability, and security of the region. President Halimah also notched up firsts in state visits. She made Singapore's first state visit to Saudi Arabia in November 2019.
I hope that the fact that they agreed to host me is a big acknowledgement that Saudi Arabia is also looking at ways of how they want to encourage greater women's participation, encouraging women to participate more in the economy, in society, and so on.
She was warmly received by His Majesty King Salman bin Abdul Aziz Al Saud, who conferred the Abdul Aziz Medal on President Halimah. This is the highest civilian honor that Saudi Arabia can give to any foreign leader. The visit of President to Saudi Arabia attracted considerable attention among the Saudis and other Arabs in the Gulf states. They were impressed to see Singapore leader who is not just a woman, but also a Muslim and coming from a secular state like Singapore.
I think you must look at the whole Middle East, not just Saudi Arabia. If you look at whole Middle East, the UAE, you look at Qatar, the whole Middle East is transforming itself. Saudi Arabia is also transforming itself. And they want to diversify their economies. They want to look at how to have stronger bilateral relations with other countries. And for Singapore's part, that was a good thing that we did because I was the first head of state to visit Saudi Arabia. I was also the first head of state to visit Uzbekistan, to visit Kazakhstan, and also to visit Germany and Netherlands.
President Halimah's final state visit was to Qatar in June 2023. There, she received an added special honor for heads of states. She was received by Qatar's Amir at the administrative office, escorted by royal horses and camels.
It definitely is an honor and privilege to be able to serve Madam for her last state visit, which I think is memorable for her as well. For me as the full-time ADC, as per all state visits, I think I put in extra effort to make sure that all proceedings will run very, very well so that she can just focus on building relationship with the foreign head of state and head of government.
I will miss all this, the chance to interact with, world leaders, the chance to interact with Singaporeans based in different parts of the world. Those are very meaningful to me because we still maintain a certain contact with them. The fact that many of them travel from all parts of the country that they are living or working in just to meet the President of Singapore is really very warm and touching. It's been a most fulfilling part of my job as well. We are starting a new term of government.
On the home front, the President presides at the opening of Parliament as part of her ceremonial duties. And she is an important part of National Day celebrations.
President Halimah Yacob arriving for her very first NDP as head of state.
A member of our community as well, championing the less privileged, the disadvantaged, the vulnerable segments of our society. Parade Commander Lieutenant Colonel Tang Wee Go for the parade inspection. Cheers and applause for President Halimah from the audience.
Lots in store, exciting times ahead. Akan datang.
What I was hoping to do is to go beyond just the constitutional functions and constitutional roles, and that is to see how I could galvanize, rally Singaporeans, really be a unifying force. The idea basically is to make people feel included, that we're all in the same boat. And I hope that that was one of the things I was hoping to do when I became president in 2017.
One of the first things President Halimah set in motion was the Empowering for Life Fund. It supports disadvantaged people and low-income families.
And part of the fund went to NTUC for the NTUC Lift Up Workers Program. And this NTUC Lift Up Pathfinder Workers Program, it basically means that the low-wage workers, together with the family, upskill themselves as a family. You know, and that was very impactful. President Halimah has been a workers' president as much as she's a president for all Singaporeans.
The Empowering for Life Fund came under the umbrella of the President's Challenge. Started in 2000 under President S.R. Nathan, it is an annual community outreach and fundraising campaign for beneficiaries selected yearly by the President's office. President Halimah is patron to more than 40 charities and organizations, providing visibility to causes and helping them raise funds.
For people with disabilities, I have also, under the President's Challenge, initiated a program called the Enabling Employment Pledge. 280 employers have come on board, and the idea is for them to provide, have a mindset shift at the workplace, for them also to redesign the work, for them also to appoint mentors if necessary, to make it easy for people with disabilities to work and to continue working.
Ho Gyok Chu of Human Capital recalls an event at the Istana in 2020 when the President spoke on disability inclusiveness.
Well, one very visible impact and very touching impact was when she opened up the banquet halls of the Istana. The guests received their invitation to Istana banquet. They were amazed and they were so delighted that it was inside the Istana house.
President Halimah also spearheaded a program to help young people dealing with mental health issues by linking the Institute of Mental Health and social service agencies.
We started a program, and that is for young people with mild to moderate mental health issues. We work with IMH, and then IMH developed programs for the counsellors at 4 social service agencies, and they then run programs for young people. Because the young people, they need treatment at the hospital, but after they have received the treatment, in between, they also need support on the ground. And I'm very happy that it's going to be part of a national effort to have it done throughout the island.
This particular program is really in trying to train community agencies to support persons with mental illness back in the community so that they can be included in activities, and that training requires staff of these social service agencies to understand the difference between a mental health problem and a mental illness. She's done 2 things. One is that she's talked about mental health and mental illness. The second, of course, is that she's been advocating for persons with mental illness to speak up, to share their stories, because only in those sharing are we more able to accept them, and that's quite important.
In President Halimah's final year in office, the President's Challenge focused on caregivers and funding programs that help them.
caregivers often carry with them the invisible load of worrying and caring for their loved ones with special needs.
At an event organised for caregivers, President Halimah's support was appreciated.
Bagus, kita dapat supporting dari Presiden Halimah Yacob.
It's very happy to see her supporting people with disability.
Motivate me to do more in life. Because without people's support, we can't do anything.
The causes that I champion, that I feel strongly about, that I've been advocating, not just when I became president, but way before that as well. Issues like mental health, like people with disabilities, and situation of women, low-income families, workers. And those are issues which are very close to my heart, and I hope that during my presidency, I've been able to give them a little bit more highlight and given them a little bit more attention, increase awareness about such issues. And if I've done that, then I'll be most happy and grateful.
I think apart from giving everyone else a role model, her ability and her willingness to give voice to the disadvantaged, that is something very impactful because she gives voice to people who are voiceless.
To date, the President's Challenge has raised over $170 million and rallied over 87,000 volunteers.
There has been a lot of focus under President Halimah to look at providing, employment support to build up the employability of different vulnerable groups. So, for example, one of the initiatives that we support under President's Challenge is to help women return to the workforce. They've been able to really benefit from President's Challenge to get advanced certificates, to be placed and trained in employment. And we have examples of people who have really, earned more, get better trained as a result of President's Challenge support. And also as a result of volunteers, we've also had a chance to train, for example, people in basic maintenance of air conditioning so that they can find employment and be employed.
The President's Star Charity is the face of the President's Challenge in the media. An annual event, it has been telecast over MediaCorp since 1994.
Working with the President is something that we always enjoy doing because it's time for us to really understand her from a different dimension. It was always a collaboration where she always strike a balance, knowing what's important is to canvass the funding more than that of showcasing herself. She take a step back from the limelight and she let other people shine.
Race and religion are sensitive subjects in Singapore, and the President is active in interfaith events and dialogues.
Among the first thing that she did, she actually invited the council members from the interreligious organization to the Istana for a tea. I think at that point in time, we did realize that for her, interreligious is important, and that as president, she was going to set the tone to have that as also part of her priority. The fact that we can come together and exchange in a very informal setting, she sets the tone that even though she is president, but the fact is that she was able to put everyone at ease.
Not surprisingly, the President has a heavy schedule.
I do a lot of engagements. I've attended about 1,400 events over 6 years. These are just events, they are not meetings, Meetings are additional to that.
The President makes time to talk one-on-one with people she meets.
How's it like being President of Singapore?
It's a very heavy job. A lot of personalities. One is constitutional, where I deal with matters concerning the reserves. You see you all. 414. But what I would like to remember also is a president who tries to build a more inclusive, caring, compassionate society. And I've done this through many programs that we have. For instance, the Picnic at the Istana program, where we bring in children from disadvantaged homes. And so these are things that give me that satisfaction. What would I miss most? I think I would miss the garden the most. It's not the structure itself, but the garden. The garden is a very beautiful garden, very also pleasant, that as you walk, you really feel very calm. That's why I made that effort to get more people to come in, to visit the garden. And what I've done is to try to make the garden more accessible also, because sometimes we have people coming in wheelchairs, elderly, frail. I've contributed the best that I could. And I hope that has been supportive to the community, that has been able to raise the profile of certain underserved communities. I would be very happy if people were to remember me as a president that is accessible, that is inclusive, that tries to reach out to all segments of society.
Madam President's term was very important to us who work in the disability community, because she was a relentless advocate for the work we did, for the opportunities that persons with disabilities should have in the community and in public spaces.
I'll remember President Halimah Yacob as a people's president, with her warm personality and also a humble touch.
We've been through a lot of obstacles, but for me, as a citizen, everything felt so smooth. So I really thank her for that, and I think she's done a really good job.